What looks like a retired mechanic turns out to be something far more dangerous. You won't believe what happens when they mess with the wrong daughter. Let us know in the comments section below. Have you ever seen someone underestimate the quietest person in the room? Joseph Sullivan had hands that told stories better than words ever could. Scarred, calloused, with deep creases etched into the knuckles like faded war maps. But these days, those hands didn't break down doors or dismantle enemy bunkers. They rebuilt outboard motors and guided old fishermen through tune-ups at his modest marina on the edge of the Oregon coast. The people in town knew him simply as Joe, the widowed mechanic who always charged fair, never asked questions, and took long walks by the water after sunset. No one ever asked what he did before, and Joseph never offered. Emily knew, of course. She'd grown up hearing fragments of her father's life, not from his lips, but from the eyes of old men who shook his hand a little too firmly, or the few funeral receptions where unfamiliar Marines saluted the casket and nodded toward her father like they were sharing a silent battlefield prayer. She knew her father didn't scare easily. But more importantly, she knew why the faded trident tattoo behind his right shoulder blade, the one he always tried to keep hidden, meant he was a man built for storms, even if he chose peace now. At 22, Emily had inherited her mother's patience and her father's fire. She ran the harbor's small supply shop, ordering spark plugs and flares, bait and bottled water with the same precision her dad once used clearing rooms in Kandahar. She liked it simple. Her dreams weren't grand. They were anchored. Quiet days, hot coffee, an old Labrador named Max. Her father's world was hers too, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. Which made what happened next feel like rust crawling up the spine of a clean, oiled machine. The first time Emily saw them, they weren't doing anything technically wrong, just revving too loud near the entrance, just leering a little too long at her while she was locking up the shop, just dragging their boots across the dock like it was already theirs. That kind of wrong, the kind that starts small and poisonous. 3 of them, leather-clad, faces like they'd forgotten how to smile without showing teeth. One had flames tattooed up both arms like some caricature from a cheap action movie. Another, the biggest, wore mirrored sunglasses even though the sky was overcast and the sun hadn't shown its face all morning. The third one, slick, wiry, snake-like, just stood in the back and watched. Always watched. They didn't say much to her the first day, just nodded. One of them whistled a low, mocking tune that didn't quite sound like a song, more like a dare. She didn't rise to it. She simply nodded back, turned the key in the shop door, and walked away. She could feel them watching her until she disappeared down the ramp. She didn't tell her father, not yet. But the second day they came back. This time they parked their bikes right in front of the boat slip Joseph was working in, as if it belonged to them. Their engines didn't turn off. They just rumbled. Deep, thundering, predatory. Joseph didn't look up. He kept his eyes on the carburetor he was adjusting. The boat's owner, a retired coastie named Hal, looked between Joe and the bikers, unsure whether to speak or stay quiet. "You Sullivan?" the one with the mirrored glasses finally asked, climbing off his Harley like he was descending from a throne. Joseph didn't stop turning his wrench. "You the tax man?" he said, deadpan. The biker laughed, an ugly, hollow bark. "Nah, but I am collecting." "Then you're wasting time. Nothing here to take but salt and sweat." The other 2 chuckled. Snake Eyes didn't. He kept scanning the boats, the layout, counting dock cameras. That one was a recon man. Joseph recognized the posture. Emily came down the ramp just in time to see the moment the laughter turned. The man with the flame tattoos, he spit on the dock, right near her father's boot. Joseph didn't look. He just reached down, twisted the wrench tight, then slowly wiped his hands on the same red rag he always kept in his back pocket. Only then did he raise his head, slowly, meeting the mirrored sunglasses head-on. "My daughter's trying to work," he said. "Your noise is scaring the fish." The mirrored glasses came off. "You trying to tell me something, old man?" Joseph's eyes didn't blink. "No," he said. "I'm asking you something. You understand the difference?" Flame Tattoo took a step forward, puffing up like a pit bull. Snake Eyes leaned his head, listening, sizing up the silence that followed. And in that breath, just a breath, something shifted, just for a moment. Then Emily spoke. "Hey," she said sharply, coming around the side of the boat, stepping between her dad and the bikers. "You're blocking our ramp. If you need service, there's a clipboard on the post. Otherwise, move along." Flame Tattoo whistled. "Feisty little thing, ain't she?" Mirror Glasses smiled now, lips peeling back like gum on pavement. "You always talk to customers like that, sweetheart?" "I talk to disrespectful people like that," Emily said, fire flaring in her voice. "Customers don't leer. Customers don't block my father's dock." That smile froze. Joseph stood now, slowly wiping grease from his hands. "Boys," he said, "last warning." "Or what?" Flame Tattoo asked, taking one step too many. Joseph didn't raise his voice. He didn't raise his fists. He just said quietly, "Leave the girl alone." That was when Snake Eyes spoke for the first time. "Come on," he muttered to the others, his voice flat. "We'll be back. Let's see how friendly this harbor is when the lights go out." They turned, one by one, and mounted their bikes, but not before Mirrored Glasses leaned in close enough for Joseph to smell his breath. "You think you're untouchable out here, old man?" he whispered. "Everyone's touchable, especially when you got a pretty little daughter running the front." Joseph's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Not yet. He watched them roll out, their engines echoing across the water like thunder made of teeth. Emily looked at her father. "You going to tell me who they are?" Joseph's eyes remained fixed on the disappearing tailpipes. "No," he said. "I'm going to show you." And just like that, something ancient in Joseph Sullivan clicked back into place, silent and waiting. Something the iron serpents never saw coming. Joseph didn't sleep much that night. He never really did. But this time, it wasn't the phantom echoes of explosions in the desert or the old ghosts of fallen teammates stirring him. It was that whisper, that smirk, that final threat about his daughter. That was the kind of thing that settled into a man's bones like wet sand, heavy and cold. He sat at the small workbench in his shed behind the marina, the kind of place where bolts and wires lined up neatly where discipline could still live. On the bench was a dismantled carburetor, but Joseph wasn't really looking at it. His hands were still resting quietly in his lap, and next to them, sitting like a relic unearthed from a time most folks pretended never existed, was a dusty green Pelican case. The lock clicked. Inside, wrapped in a cloth that once served as part of his deployment bag, lay his Navy SEAL Challenge coin, his old K-bar knife, and a set of dog tags engraved with the name Sullivan. Josephus. He hadn't touched the coin in years, not since the funeral, not since the last mission that took more than just men. It took purpose. But now, the feeling that had been dormant inside him all these years was starting to pulse again. He picked up the coin, turned it once in his palm, and slid it into his back pocket. Not as a threat, not as a symbol of pride, but as a reminder. Out by the docks, the morning rolled in gray and wet. The town was already humming with whispers. Word traveled faster in a coastal town than anywhere else. A few of the charter captains had seen the iron serpents roll out of the marina last night, and a few more had seen Emily's face on her way home. Not bruised, not crying, but sharp-eyed, silent, the kind of look you don't get from a bad date or a misdelivery. Something had happened. At the diner, tables shifted slightly when Joseph walked in. Conversations dipped to a hush just long enough to confirm what people feared. The quiet man had been stirred. People respected Joseph here, but they didn't know him, not really, and they certainly didn't want to find out who he used to be. Except for one, a man in his late 50s sitting by the window with an old flight jacket and fingers stained with engine oil. Charlie Peterson. He'd been Air Force, but more importantly, he'd served near where Joseph had. They'd never worn the same uniform, but they shared enough stories and scars to speak the same unspoken language. Charlie nodded once as Joseph passed. "Heard you had company last night." Joseph poured his own coffee, added nothing, and took a seat across from him. "You hear who they were?" Charlie nodded again. "Iron serpents. They've been drifting up the coast for months. Shook up a few boatyards near Eureka, caused a fire in Brookings. You're the first place they didn't finish what they started." Joseph didn't blink. "They'll be back." Charlie stirred his coffee. "I know." For a long moment neither man said a word. Then Joseph leaned forward. There was one, shorter, snake tattoo. Didn't talk much. "Yeah," Charlie said slowly. "That'd be Rafe Vicks, recon Marine once. Same unit as my cousin in Afghanistan. Word is, something broke in him. Stayed in country too long after discharge. Took jobs no one wanted. Merc work. Got tied up with serpents a few years back. He's not the muscle, he's the mind. If he's there, it means they're organized." Joseph stared out the window, jaw tightening. "Organized or not, they threatened Emily." Charlie nodded grimly. "And they don't know who you are." Joseph met his eyes, steady and even. "They will." Back at the marina, Emily was rearranging stock in the bait shop when she heard the knock. 3 short raps. The pattern she and her dad had used since she was a kid to signal when one of them didn't want to spook the other. He stepped in, ducking beneath the low frame, wiping rain from his shoulders. She looked up. You didn't come home last night." "I stayed in the shed," he said. "Had some thinking to do." Emily narrowed her eyes slightly. "You're going to tell me now?" Joseph glanced around, then closed the door behind him. "They're Iron Serpents, biker outfit. They move in, take over territory, usually ports, docks, anywhere that moves cash quietly. They'll shake down businesses, extort locals. If no one pushes back, they spread fast." She crossed her arms. "So?" "We push back." Joseph gave her a look, one that mixed admiration with paternal dread. "You don't push back on people like this unless you're prepared to finish it." "I am," she said. "I've seen what they're like. I don't want that in our town. I don't want to be looking over my shoulder just walking to my car." Joseph nodded slowly. Then, without a word, he reached into his jacket and set something on the counter. "The coin." Emily stared at it. Her voice softened. "You kept it." He nodded once. "I told myself I'd never need it again," he said. "But there's a line I can't let them cross, and they put a toe on it yesterday." She leaned closer, voice hushed. "What are you going to do?" Joseph's eyes didn't waver. "Start making calls." 2 hours later, the marina saw a few new visitors. Old boats pulling up to the far docks, trucks with out-of-state plates parking across the road. One by one, men stepped out. Men with slow walks, clean eyes, and sleeves that revealed military ink in shades of green and black. By sundown there were 5 of them in the shed behind the marina. Joseph shook each hand like he was reconnecting with pieces of himself. Wes Porter, SEAL Team 5. Derek Knox, 4th Recon. Angel Martinez, Corpsman. Roy-chan, EOD. Casey Vick. Joseph paused. "You related to Rafe?" The man nodded solemnly. "Brother. Haven't seen him in 6 years. Last I heard he was gone dark. Not the man I knew." Joseph looked him in the eye. "He's here, running with the serpents." Casey's jaw twitched. "Then maybe it's time I saw him again." As the night settled, the shed hummed with quiet planning. Maps unfolded, old photos shared, radio chatter intercepted. None of them were in uniform anymore, but they all moved like they never stopped training. Muscle memory, precise and focused. Joseph stood at the center, the coin pressed into his palm like an old battle flag. "They think they're claiming a town," he said quietly. "But they've just declared war on the wrong harbor, and tomorrow, when they come back, they won't be riding into a fishing village." He looked at each man in turn. "They'll be riding into a fortress." Outside, Emily watched the shed from the shop window. Her phone buzzed once, a message from a friend downtown. "They're back, at the bar near the pier," loud, "asking about you." She set the phone down. Her reflection in the glass stared back at her. She didn't feel scared anymore, because now she knew what they didn't. Her father wasn't just a mechanic. He was a storm waiting to hit. The iron serpents rolled in just past noon the next day, not bothering to conceal their return. Their engines growled like thunder crawling up from the earth, drowning out the usual clinks and chatter of the marina. Locals stiffened in doorways. Boat captains looked up from their lines. Even seagulls took off, wheeling into the cloudy sky like they knew something heavy was about to break loose. Rafe Vicks was the first to dismount. He took off his gloves slowly, fingers flexing like coils unspooling. His eyes scanned the marina, not for threats, but for reactions. He wasn't just here to make noise. He was here to read. Behind him, Rex Maddox strutted off his Harley, tossing his sunglasses onto the tank. Rex was the kind of man who didn't believe in subtlety. Power was noise, power was posture, and today he wanted everyone watching to know they were back, not for conversation. They headed straight for the bait shop. Emily saw them through the glass door as soon as they turned onto the dock. She didn't flinch. She didn't reach for the bat beneath the counter, though she knew exactly where it was. She simply stepped from behind the register and walked outside to meet them halfway, the wind lifting her dark braid off her back like a banner. "You lost," she said, her voice calm but flint-edged. Rex grinned as if they were old friends. "Not at all, sweetheart. Just here to discuss your dad's hospitality, or lack of it." "The discussion's over," Emily replied. "You had your chance yesterday." "See, here's the thing," Rex said, stepping closer. "We don't usually get denied more than once, especially not by families who run quiet little businesses next to wide open water. Makes us curious." Rafe didn't speak, but he took one long look at Emily, her stance, her hands, the way her weight shifted on the balls of her feet. Military awareness, not learned, raised. "She's not bluffing," Rafe muttered almost to himself. "What was that?" Rex asked. Rafe didn't answer, he just kept watching. That's when the shed door opened. Joseph stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag like he'd just finished tuning an engine. His walk was slow, measured, but there was something in the way his boots hit the dock, deliberate, the sound of a man who's walked into far worse with less preparation. Behind him, the other veterans emerged in pairs. They didn't form a line. They didn't square up like goons in a back alley. They just appeared. Calm, steady, watching. Rex blinked. "You call in reinforcements?" Joseph stopped 5 feet from Rex. "I called some friends. People who don't appreciate threats to civilians. Or to my daughter." Rex looked around at the gathered men, each of them standing with the relaxed posture of someone who could drop you in 3 moves and not break stride. Wes Porter stood beside an old crab crate, chewing a toothpick. Angel Martinez leaned against the edge of a winch, arms crossed, smile thin and dangerous. Roy Chan had his sleeves rolled and was adjusting a mooring line with casual precision, like he had all the time in the world to take care of business after. Casey Vick was last to emerge, and when Rafe saw him, his whole body went still. "Case," he said, flat. "Didn't expect to see you like this," Casey replied, voice low. "What are you doing here?" Rafe asked. "I could ask you the same," Casey said, "but I already know. Question is, do you even recognize yourself anymore?" Rafe's jaw worked, but no words came out. Rex, sensing the tension was drifting into territory he didn't control, raised his voice. "This doesn't change anything. You're outnumbered, outmatched. These old boys can puff their chests all they want. Won't stop us from coming back." Joseph looked him dead in the eye. "You misunderstand, Rex. We're not here to puff chests. We're here to draw a line." Rex scoffed. "That's so." "You cross it again," Joseph said, "and I won't be calling friends. I'll be calling the feds. I've got enough surveillance, intercepted chatter, and faces on camera to put half your crew under federal racketeering charges. You think you're scary? I've fought men who didn't blink when mortars fell, and I watched better men than you die protecting strangers they never even knew. You're not scary, Rex. You're predictable." Silence fell over the dock. Even the wind seemed to pause. Then Rafe took a step forward, speaking not to Joseph but to his brother. "This what you think I've become?" he asked. Casey didn't flinch. "You tell me." "I was left behind," Rafe snapped. "Discarded. You all came back and found purpose. You think I wanted this life?" "No," Casey said softly. "But you chose it, and you can choose something else." Rafe's hands clenched. Then slowly his gaze drifted to Emily. "What happened yesterday? I didn't know they'd take it that far." "You knew enough," Joseph said, voice cold but calm. "And now you know where we stand." Rex stepped in again, trying to retake control. "Enough of this Hallmark reunion crap. I don't care about your little therapy circle. This dock's mine now. You want to play soldier? Fine. But I don't need to beat you here. I can ruin you in ways you haven't even dreamed of yet." Joseph took one small step forward. "Try." It wasn't a dare. It was permission, and Rex saw it. He saw the controlled stillness in Joseph's eyes, the way his team shifted subtly behind him, their weight redistributing like they were ready to move without a word. He saw something that rattled him. A unit, a real one, not patched together with biker bravado, but forged in fire, sealed in blood, and bound by something far more dangerous than fear. Loyalty. Rex spat on the dock, turned to his men. "Let's go. We'll see how long they last when the money starts drying up." They turned, walked back to their bikes. But this time there was no smugness in their retreat, no victory in the exit. Rafe hesitated, then turned back to Casey. "You serious about a way out?" "We've got a spot opening up in the veterans program in Salem," Casey said. "Mentorship, structure, a room of your own. Might even find the version of you that didn't wear that patch." Rafe stared at the road for a long moment, then slowly reached up and peeled off his iron serpent's cut. It landed with a dull slap on the dock. He walked toward his brother. Behind them the bikes roared to life. But something had changed. In one of them, and in the town itself. As Rex and the others disappeared around the bend, Joseph turned to his team. "This isn't over," he said. "No," Wes said, "but we just bought this town a little peace." "And a little hope," Martinez added. Joseph turned back toward the shop. Emily was still standing there, hands in her jacket pockets, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You handled yourself well," he said. She tilted her head. "You too, soldier." Then she looked at Rafe, who now stood beside Casey, quiet and awkward like someone waking from a long sleep. "You got a lot to make up for," she said. "I know," he replied. "Then start walking," she said, "one step at a time." And he did. 2 nights passed, and peace settled in, but not the kind you could trust. It was the sort of peace that crackled in the silence, the pause before a storm, the kind Joseph Sullivan recognized from countless missions. He'd seen it in Helmand Province before an ambush, in the eyes of insurgents just before they made desperate moves, and now he could feel it slithering into his town like oil in water. The iron serpents hadn't returned, not visibly, but that didn't mean they were gone. That kind of ego doesn't just pack up after one standoff, not when they've been embarrassed, not when they've lost one of their own. Joseph knew men like Rex. They didn't forgive, and they didn't forget. They regrouped. They retaliated. Joseph stood at the edge of the dock early that morning, looking out across the bay. The ocean was black, still. No wind. The clouds hung low, bruised purple and gray, barely moving. Behind him, the faint hum of life began to rise. Emily turning on lights in the bait shop, the whistle of Hal's kettle 2 boats down. The marina didn't stop because a gang passed through, but it remembered. Joseph's eyes narrowed as he noticed something strange on the far slip. Faint drag marks along the dock edge, right near where one of the emergency boats had been tied 2 nights ago. That boat was gone now, but no one had logged its checkout. He made a mental note and turned back toward the main road. Later that morning, word spread fast. The bait shop had been broken into overnight. Not ransacked, strategically hit. The cash drawer was left untouched. The cameras were yanked from their hinges, cords sliced with clean precision, inventory untouched. But in the back, where Emily kept the safe and records, every drawer had been pulled out and scattered. Her laptop was missing. More importantly, so was the emergency radio she used to coordinate with the Coast Guard during offshore charters. Emily stood with her arms crossed, teeth clenched, eyes burning. "They weren't here to rob us," she muttered. "They were looking for something, or someone." Joseph crouched near the back door, where the latch had been peeled back with something slim and sharp. "They were sending a message," he said, "letting us know they can still get close." Charlie arrived 10 minutes later, squinting at the broken camera mounts. "They went for the power first," he said. "Cut the backup feed, too. This wasn't some crankhead joyride. This was planned." Emily looked at Joseph. "So what do we do now?" Joseph stood slowly. "Now we prepare for what happens next." That night, Joseph sat down with the team in the shed. Maps were spread across the table again, but this time they included the entire town perimeter. Satellite photos, road access points, places someone could hide bikes and vans without being seen. Casey Vick tapped his pen against a storm drain marked 3 blocks from the marina. "If they want leverage, they won't come back swinging right away," he said. "They'll target soft points, community leaders, police allies, small businesses that support the harbor." Martinez nodded. "This is pressure tactics. Classic psychological warfare. Get the town scared enough to ask us to stand down." "But we won't," Joseph said. The room quieted. "We don't flinch," Joseph continued. "Not this time. We don't act first, but when they move again, we finish it. For good." A beat passed, then Wes leaned forward. "There's a way to take the fight to them without swinging a single punch." Joseph raised an eyebrow. "Intel," Wes said. "Serpents run a low-profile network up and down the coast. Abandoned warehouses, biker bars, shady trucking yards. One of them's not far from here, about 20 miles inland. Old lumber yard. Rumors say they've been stashing things there. Bikes, burners, maybe even bodies." Chan spoke up from the back. "You want us to hit it?" Wes shook his head. "No, I want to watch it." Joseph nodded slowly. "Recon." That evening, Wes, Chan, and Martinez loaded into a nondescript service van borrowed from a friend of Charlie's. It bore the name of a pest control business on the side, but the back was kitted with equipment: scopes, long-range mics, cameras with night vision. As the 3 left the shed, Joseph turned to Casey. "I want you here with Emily." Casey hesitated. "You sure?" Joseph looked him square in the eye. "She trusts you now. And she's got a temper. Someone needs to make sure she doesn't go chasing ghosts with a wrench in her hand." That earned the faintest smile from Emily. They watched the van pull away in silence. 3 hours passed, then 4. Finally, Joseph's phone buzzed. "Wes, you need to see this." Inside the shed, the feed from the hidden camera snapped to life on the laptop screen. The picture was grainy but clear enough. A wide lot overrun with weeds, fenced in with old chain link and razor wire. On the far end stood a long, tin-roofed building, the former lumber processing unit. A dozen bikes sat in shadow along the side wall. One of them had flame decaled. But it wasn't the bikes that stopped Joseph's breath. It was the truck. An old box truck, white, rusted edges, no plates. Joseph leaned in. "That's the truck that was tailing me 3 days ago. I saw it parked by the town hall. Thought it was a delivery. Never saw a logo." Inside the warehouse, through the shaky lens of Wes's night vision zoom, movement flickered. At least 6 figures, maybe more. One held what looked like a sledgehammer. Another appeared to be inspecting something on a table, flat, wrapped in plastic. Emily came closer. "What is that?" Joseph's lips pressed into a line. "Explosives." "Jesus." Casey muttered. Martinez's voice came over the comms. "We're not getting closer. Too risky. But I count 8, maybe 9. Definitely storing something back there. Doesn't look like a supply run, looks like a plan. Joseph turned toward the team. Then it's time we disrupt it. He picked up his phone. This ends now. But even as he dialed, the first sirens began echoing faintly down the coast road. Joseph froze. It wasn't coming from town. It was coming toward it. He stepped outside, looked east. In the distance, a thick column of smoke curled into the sky, black, oily, fast. The old volunteer firehouse. Burning. He grabbed his radio. Emily, check the live cam. Is that the fire station? Static. Then her voice strained. It's not just the station. The truck garage next to it is going too. That's where the rescue boats are stored. Dad, they're hitting infrastructure. Joseph's blood turned to ice. This wasn't a message anymore. It was war. Wes's voice crackled again. Joseph, 2 bikes just left the warehouse headed your way fast. Joseph turned, eyes hard. Get out, pull back, we'll regroup. He shut the laptop, the green glow of the night vision blinking out like the final second on a countdown. Emily's voice came through again. They want us scared. Joseph's jaw clenched. They're about to learn what fear really looks like. The fire raged for 5 straight hours. Smoke poured over the harbor, choking the air, blanketing the town in a grim haze. No one slept. The sound of sirens gave way to silence, then ash. The local fire crew, stretched thin and under-equipped, managed to contain the blaze, but not before half the truck garage and the station's backup generator had been reduced to twisted metal. Rex Maddox had made his move. The strike was surgical. No casualties, just destruction, just fear. He'd sent a message not just to Joseph Sullivan, but to every business owner, dock worker, and family that relied on that harbor. This wasn't just about intimidation anymore. This was a hostile takeover. But Joseph didn't flinch. By sunrise, he had already called a town meeting. Not at City Hall, it was compromised. Not at the firehouse, it was still smoldering. Instead, Joseph opened up the marina's largest boathouse, a wide, open-air structure usually reserved for festival storage and off-season events. Emily posted a notice on every door from the diner to the tackle shop. Charlie Peterson drove around with a bullhorn. By 10 a.m., the town showed up. Fishermen, small business owners, local families, all of them filed in. Their faces were taut with uncertainty, some with anger, others with fear. Joseph stood at the front, flanked by Casey, Emily, and the rest of the veterans. He had to give them a speech. He gave them the truth. You already know who they are. You saw what they did last night. But what you don't know, what they don't want you to know, is that they're afraid. That word sparked something. The crowd shifted. They're afraid of what happens when people stop being scared of them. When a town stands up and says, "Not here. Not anymore." A murmur moved through the group. We've fought people like this before, on different soil, with different names. They try to divide us, pick us apart, make us doubt ourselves. That's how they win. Joseph turned to Emily, then back to the crowd. They picked the wrong place this time. A hand shot up in the back, an older woman with sunburned skin and a Coast Guard sweatshirt. What are we supposed to do? We're not soldiers. No, Joseph said. You're stronger. You've survived hurricanes, storms, supply shortages. You raised families here. You built this harbor. What we're going to do is take that strength, and we're going to use it. He nodded to Charlie, who brought up a large bulletin board covered with satellite photos and schematics of the town. We've mapped every route they've used. We know where they're hiding. What we need now is coordination. That's when the shift happened. The hesitation in the room gave way to resolve. Roy stepped forward. We're setting up a volunteer watch, 2-person teams, rotate every 8 hours. No one walks alone after dark. Chan added, we've got old radios from our service days, encrypted, long range. We'll set up a communication network. The docks, shops, back roads, everything's going to be covered. Angel stepped up next. And we're training anyone who wants to learn basic defense, not to fight, to protect. Disarmament, escape routes, how to handle threats. You won't need weapons. You'll need knowledge. By the end of the hour, volunteers had signed up, radios were distributed, Emily marked maps with thumbtacks and highlighters. The town that once stood in the serpent's shadow was now drawing its own battle lines. Rex's threat had backfired. That evening, the veterans broke off into squads. Joseph and Casey took the south end of the harbor, scouting near the bait shop and storage warehouses. Wes and Chan moved through the town's main street, checking alleyways and rooftops. Martinez stayed with Emily, reinforcing the security around the shop and installing a second layer of alarms. It wasn't about turning the town into a fortress. It was about showing the serpents they couldn't isolate them, couldn't shake them loose, couldn't own them. Just after midnight, Casey's radio crackled. "Wes, we've got movement. 3 bikes, headed your way. One of them has the flame decals." Joseph tightened his grip on the radio. "Rex." They were back, but not in force. This was a probe. Joseph clicked the mic. "Let 'em come. We'll welcome them properly." He and Casey moved fast, ducking into the shadows along the bait shop's edge. The marina lights flickered once, twice. Part of the alarm system Joseph had modified to signal power tampering. The bikes rolled in slow. This wasn't bravado. This was recon. Rex dismounted first, boots crunching the gravel, eyes scanning. His 2 flanks fanned out, one toward the dock's edge, the other toward the boathouse. Rex stepped forward, smug as ever. "I gotta say, Sullivan," he called into the dark, "didn't think you had this much fight left in you." Joseph stepped from the shadows, calm and composed. "You burned a firehouse. You think that's power?" "I think it's persuasion," Rex said, grinning. "People listen when things go boom." Joseph took 1 step forward. "You're right, they do. But sometimes what they hear isn't fear, it's purpose." Behind him, 2 spotlights snapped on. Emily and Martinez had climbed to the 2nd story of the boat shack, illuminating the dock in sharp, blinding light. The serpents flinched. And behind them, 4 locals stepped out from the shadows. Charlie, Hal, and 2 young men from the diner, holding radios, their stances solid. The serpents were surrounded. Rex's expression changed. Just slightly. "We don't want a war, Joe," he said, trying to reel it back in. "You bring the town into this, someone's going to get hurt." "You already did that," Joseph said, stepping closer. "You vandalized our home, you tried to poison it with fear. But the thing about small towns—" He nodded toward the locals. "Don't run." Rex's eyes flicked to his men. He wasn't dumb. He was outnumbered, outplayed, and worst of all, he'd underestimated them. And again, without a word, he backed toward his bike. The others followed. But before he mounted, he turned one last time. "This ain't over." Joseph's voice cut through the night. "No, it ends when we say it ends." And with that, the serpents pulled away. Faster this time, no drawn-out exits, no victory smirks. Just the sound of engines shrinking into the dark. Joseph exhaled slowly. Emily came down from the deck and stood beside him, face flushed, heart pounding. "You think that's the last of them?" she asked. "No," he said, "but I think they finally realize we're not waiting around for permission." The wind picked up off the water, crisp and briny. Casey turned to Joseph. "They'll regroup." "Let them," Joseph replied. "We're ready now." And for the first time in weeks, he meant it. The sun rose blood orange over the water, casting long shadows across the rebuilt dock. Seagulls wheeled overhead, oblivious to the fact that just a few nights earlier this place had felt like the edge of a war zone. But this morning the marina didn't feel tense. It felt alive. Emily stood behind the counter of the bait shop, reshelving boxes of fresh tackle and refolding a map display that had fallen during the break-in. The new security system blinked quietly behind her, a small green light flashing every few seconds like a heartbeat. Calm, steady, no red alarms, no late-night visitors. Not since Rex rode off into the night with his tail tucked tighter than his bandana. Joseph was already up, pacing the dock in his work gloves, inspecting every inch of the wooden planks, checking lines, cleaning oil from the railings. Routine was his rhythm. Stability was his song. And now that the threat had finally faded, he could return to it. But not quite the same as before. Something had shifted in him. Not broken. Unlocked. A radio chirped from his belt. "Hal says the crab boat's in early. Needs the winch reset." Joseph clicked the mic. "On my way." He passed the old boathouse, its interior now organized into neat sections of donated supplies, walkie-talkies, protective gear, and first aid. A community defense center, born from fire and fear, but run now on unity and commitment. Locals rotated shifts there, and even the town's teenagers had started helping, learning radio codes and patrol routines like it was part of their civic duty. Near the end of the pier, Casey, Vic, and Rafe sat in folding chairs, watching the boats come and go. Rafe had stayed. Not because he had to, because he wanted. He'd turned in what he knew: locations of stash houses, names of associates, supply routes. The feds had taken notice, quietly, without drama, but Joseph made sure they knew one thing: the town would vouch for Rafe now. Casey elbowed his brother. "You look like you've aged 20 years in a week." Rafe smirked. "Feels like I've lived more in the last 5 days than I did in the last 5 years. You gonna stick with the program in Salem?" "Yeah, they've got a spot for me. Structure, therapy, job placement, might even learn how to live again." "You ever forget what they made you into?" Rafe shook his head. "No, but I don't have to be that anymore." Joseph nodded as he passed them. "Just make sure to send a postcard." They laughed, quiet and real. Inside the town diner, the TV flickered with a local news anchor speaking in clipped tones. "Authorities have confirmed the dismantling of a regional biker gang known as the Iron Serpents. Following an anonymous tip and weeks of coordinated reporting, several of their supply routes and safe houses have been seized. Law enforcement credits, civic vigilance, and local cooperation." Jenny behind the counter turned up the volume, smirking. "Well, would you look at that," she said, refilling Charlie's coffee. "Seems like quiet folks can make some real noise when they want to." Charlie lifted his mug. "To the ones who stood when no one else would." Across the booth, Martinez raised his water glass. "And to the ones who stopped standing and finally let others carry the weight." Roy Chan entered moments later with a box of new gear donated by a nearby Coast Guard station. Angel was already coordinating a training seminar with locals in the rec center, helping teach basic first aid and defensive readiness. These weren't just veterans anymore. They were part of the community, woven in, anchored. Later that afternoon, a small ceremony unfolded at the edge of the marina. No podium, no press. Just the townspeople, some folding chairs, and a flag. Emily stood beside her father as the mayor, a soft-spoken woman who'd kept a low profile during the worst of it, stepped forward. "We didn't ask for this fight. We didn't want it. But it found us. And what we discovered in facing it was each other." She turned to Joseph. "We owe you more than thanks. We owe you our harbor." Joseph raised his hand, stopping her. "You don't owe me anything. This isn't mine. It never was. This place belongs to the people who keep it running, who show up day after day, storm after storm." The mayor smiled. "Then let's make sure it stays that way." She turned, revealing a plaque covered with cloth. Emily stepped forward and pulled the cloth away. "Rains Harbor Community Hall, protected by those who serve, remembered by those who stay." A quiet ripple of applause moved through the crowd. Joseph looked at the plaque for a long moment. His throat tightened, but not from sorrow, from release. That evening, as the sun melted behind the western ridgeline, Joseph and Emily sat on the edge of the dock, legs dangling above the water. "You ever think it would end like this?" she asked. Joseph shrugged. Didn't think it would end at all. Just hoped it would lead somewhere better." Emily bumped her shoulder into his. It did. They watched the harbor lights flicker to life one by one. No smoke, no fire, just the sound of water lapping and rope creaking in the wind. "You think Rex'll ever come back?" she asked after a while. Joseph didn't answer at first. Then, "If he does, he won't find the same town." Emily turned to him. "Because we've changed?" He nodded. "Because we remembered who we are." Later that night, Emily closed up the shop while Joseph sat back in his shed, oiling the same wrench he'd used the day the serpents first arrived. He wiped it clean, set it in its place, and reached into the old pelican case one last time. The car, the coin, the tags. He stared at them for a moment, then closed the lid and locked it. Not because the war was forgotten, but because it was finally over. Outside, the wind off the coast carried the sound of music drifting from the diner, laughter from kids riding bikes, bells on a fishing boat preparing for an early trip. Life flowing again. Joseph stepped into the doorway of the shed, looked out over the marina he once built with quiet hands and a guarded heart. And this time, he smiled.